But it's not, they don't get to come back and then keep taking paid leave. And in fact, there's only 10 days of leave total. So 2 paid, 8 unpaid for the total of 10. So it's, if they want more off than that, the Employment Standards Act doesn't give it to them, though you're going to run into trouble with the Human Rights Code, but that's something to look at.
About this question, if
Sure.
we don't pay with these 2 days and year end, we should pay out this 1 to 6 day or no?
Well, the concept is that they'll be paid on, like, on the irregular payroll practices for those 2 days. So if somebody is sick on let's say you pay twice a month on the 15th and the 30th, and let's say somebody's sick on the 1st and the 2nd, and they work 8 other days. The idea is they should get paid for 10 days on the 15th, not for 8 days. If you don't pay.
Didn't take this to sickness day and year end already.
They are not bankable, right?
They're not bankable. Good question. No, they're not bankable. It's use it or lose it. Yeah, good question.
If the employee took more than 10 days for the calendar year, can you take it off for their vacation?
Absolutely. You can and should.
So only 2 days are paid out of the 10. When did this come into effect?
April 1st.
Somebody was listening. No, so it's actually so the personal emergency leave. Actually, that one's effective now. The equal pay is April 1st, and then the scheduling is January 1st.
The personal leave
Came into effect January 1st.
So
Actually, no, it came into effect like December 23rd or
So
something.
anything before that doesn't count?
Doesn't count. So it's per calendar year. So it was whatever the last few days of December were after this was proclaimed.
January 1st, basically, whatever was.
Yeah. And it's again, and it's by calendar year. So you actually have to use January 1st. You can't say we want to start things July 1st and go to June 30th. You have to go by the calendar year for this specific issue.
So all the dates that were taken in 2017 are no longer.
Generally, I would say those are not affected by this. So, I mean, if somebody took a whole bunch of days and those were unpaid because they didn't have any contractual right to sick pay, except in the narrow circumstance that it was in like the last week of 2017, then it's fine. Wouldn't be an issue.
Mm-hmm. So we have somebody who is consistently taking time off.
As happens.
More than 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
And vacation time is coming up.
Yep.
So the question is all of 2017 over? Like, can we count it anymore?
I'm not sure what it would be counted for. So if somebody's on a vacation, is your vacation done by the calendar year?
No.
No?
Vacation's coming up.
Okay. So we say when the vacation is coming up, you mean the start of your vacation year is coming up? In which?
Okay, the person started in May of last year.
Okay.
They've taken
This hypothetical person.
Multiple days off.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a vacation coming right now that she's expecting 2 weeks paid for.
Okay, but she's been paid for the days that she took off?
Yeah.
I would.
Check it out.
Well, no, I mean, you can go either way. I would. It's a question of as to. When this comes up in future, you should tell the employee at the time that you're taking it out of their vacation pay, and if they don't want that, then you can not pay them for those days. They'll be unpaid. That's the proper way to do it going forward. It's not a catastrophe to say now, oh, by the way, we paid you, you used up your vacation. There's certain issues as to whether depending on the employee, whether somebody is normally supposed to be paid, even if they don't come into work, which is a question of whether they're a true salaried employee, which most people are not, even if they get a salary. Most people, you count the days. This is going to get into a narrow issue, but I would say 90% of the time, they wiped out their vacation. Tough to them. And you'll probably get away with that, but, worst case scenario is you have to pay the vacation which you would have paid anyway. So, I think there's one at the back.
Yeah, on the contractor side of things. So I'm a contractor, and I work through XYZ agency. And I go, let's use the government, I go to Ministry of Education 5 days a week, and I work 7.5 hours a day. It's their equipment, right? It's their office, everything else. How would I now have to restructure myself so I don't get deemed as an employee?
You've got some challenges, and so if you're wanting, as many people understandably do, to be claiming, the tax write-offs and so on of being a contractor. So, it in this hypothetical scenario that you have described. What about control? What about is there a way, you might think about ways to document that the employer is not really controlling when, how, and where you do the work? Are you allowed to do it from home? Yeah, okay. Do you control the start and end times? In this
Well,
hypothetical?
they give you flexibility. I can start at 6 or I can start between 6 and 9. That's about it. They work at 7 hours during that time.
Challenging. On the other hand, well, arguably, if you're working for the Ministry of Education, you're a Crown employee, so the Employment Standards Act doesn't apply in any event because you're an employee of the Crown. It happens to be one of the blanket exclusions from the Employment Standards Act. That said, that doesn't necessarily help you with the CRA. Though it would mean that an employment standards officer wouldn't have jurisdiction to make any determination as to whether you're an employee. Though, offhand, it sounds as though it's a challenging case, and you might have some worry about spending all of the money that you're making, as with the savings in the tax treatment. But again, it's one to sit down and really do a deep dive into. But it may be one where discretion is the better part of valor. Because if things never get challenged and never get inspected, sometimes that's just the way it goes. Was there another question?
Subcontractor versus employee. Okay, when does this issue come up? And employee complains, or government can chase the employers too?
Or government can?
Chase the employers.
Both.
After the employers.
Both. So it certainly can be an employee complaint that initiates this. And that would mean that it sort of has to be determined. But nothing stops a Ministry of Labor inspector from coming to any workplace, maybe not the Crown, and saying, and making a determination. And that could be sort of inspired by an informal complaint, as opposed to like an actual specific, I'm seeking X, Y, and Z. It could just be like an anonymous tip. There are also blitzes that the Ministry of Labor does. So, they may be doing some blitzes in relation to this, probably starting off informational and then going on a more heavy enforcement from there. So, both are very real channels. Yeah.
Even if the subcontractor is happy with the conditions and everything.
And that's where the inspection becomes an issue. And it can also be an issue where maybe that one contractor is happy, but maybe there's several contractors and one of them complains, and that sometimes that complaint will just be itself, and it'll be self-contained, but sometimes if an inspector feels, an employment standards officer feels strongly about it, they may refer it to out for inspection. And on their own initiative, they can make a bunch of orders. So yeah, very much there's risk, which is sometimes part of the situation, is just managing risks. Yeah.
I have another question about, let's say, truck drivers. Like mostly truck companies, they have like contractors, drivers, but they use their own trucks, which one belongs to the company. So basically, that would be the case where they're going to be all employees, or there is something like contractors versus employees.
So the drivers own the trucks themselves?
No.
No. Sorry, the company.
I wanted to add to this question, actually. You mentioned you can rent a truck to, let's say, possibly a contractor. Is that something possible to do?
It's certainly a useful step, a useful factor if you're trying to make somebody classified as a contractor. Yeah, it's useful. It's not the be all and end all, but it's helpful.
Because that's the question, like in different industries, let's say trucking industries, and this question, is there like specific requirements? Because it's really like unclear, right?
It is unclear.
Yeah.
And
Because let's say, because that's what I've heard, like I don't know whether it's true or not, but what I've heard is if you have a driver who actually drives your truck, you cannot be treated anymore as a contractor. He has to be treated as an employee.
Yeah.
Because you tell him where to go and he goes. But
True.
like you can say, yeah, you can come, like you can start late, you can start at like, I don't know, like 7 and 10 o'clock in the morning, but that's the question. If let's say I, as an employee, can do a contract, like rent my truck, will that will do the trick?
so like there's no like simple bright line answer. So it's also not the case that just owning the truck automatically means you're a contractor, and not owning it automatically means you're an employee. There is no clear bright line like that. That I can tell you with certainty. Other than that, you are dealing with trying to make it look more like a contractor or having it look less like a contractor. We're dealing in shades of gray. So you can get closer, or more likely that somebody's a contractor by doing the rental approach structure. It's not. It doesn't have a simple. That's not a silver bullet. If they also, are renting that truck, on if they're renting it on like a weekly or a monthly basis, and they also are servicing some other customers, and they are allowed to bring somebody else in to drive the truck for them if they want to, starting to look like they're a contractor. If it's, they clock in at 9, they clock out at whatever, they have this manual of yours that they follow, they wear your uniform, like they can't do anything else with the truck except your stuff, and but there's a rental line on their pay stub, it's probably not enough. But we're dealing in shades of gray. So getting enough of the factors lined up, you'll probably be successful if the contractor determination is what you want. Having most of them not lined up, you're taking a big risk. So I just want to make sure that also addressed your answer or question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Does we have to issue T4A for contractor?
No.
Is it corporation? No?
No, that's the beauty of that's part of the essence of it being a contractor.
Just to add to this question, so the contractor, the driver has a corporation, it doesn't change anything, right? From CRA point of view. Now,
So like if they choose to operate through a corporation, like Aaron Rousseau Corporate Inc. Yeah. So it is a a factor. It's not the most important factor, but it is a factor.
So it's still 50-50.
Well, if that was the only difference, it doesn't put you into a 50-50
No.
category. But
Here's one more thing. Let's add the agency to equation.
sure.
I am a staffing agency and I supply drivers for my clients. So formally I am their employer, right? I am the employer for the drivers, and they have corporations and whatnot. They don't operate my equipment. I do not tell them what to do. Does it make a difference? And they don't go by my manuals and rules because they're working for.
Yeah. So if I'm understanding what you're saying, maybe, is you're like, well, look, really, it wouldn't seem that I'm actually the employer, but we've all just made me the employer.
I am their employer.
Yeah.
I have agreement with them.
Yeah.
But I supply them to my clients.
Yeah.
So they don't follow my rules. They
Yeah,
don't-
no, I get it. But you're saying, well, gosh, it looks like all of the factors are actually lined up for contractor.
Generally speaking.
But I am their employer, right? Is that sort of the question? So the answer is, if you choose to make somebody an employee, that's really not much challenged.
No, they actually approach me, my drivers, they
Yeah.
approach me and they say, okay, we want to be a contractors, deal
Okay.
with us as a contractor.
Okay.
We don't care how you deal with your clients, how they pay per hour or whatever.
Right.
So they want me to be a contractor, to deal with them as a contractor.
Mhm.
But is there any danger for me in this scenario?
Yeah, I mean, there is danger. So,
I know that,
but...
there is always a-
Yeah, no, but I mean, but basically, if you have it set up so that, there's a fair chance they will look like a contractor, the various factors we've talked about, et cetera, then maybe that will stand up in the event anybody challenges it. But be aware that, you run the risks, some of the ones I've outlined, if you're wrong. Even though you're like, I'm like 90% sure that they're going to be contractors. That's 10%, that they're going to be employees. And so you might get hit with, needing to pay termination and severance pay, overtime pay. There's a whole bunch of, so even if you're 90% sure, that doesn't mean there's no risk. It means there's a 10% risk. And we should correct for subjective bias. So really you're about, there's about a 30% or 40% risk. So just with that in mind, you may say, okay, I look at the risks, I look at the benefits, I look at the likelihood of anybody challenging this, which is low, since neither I nor these drivers or whoever, not drivers, or these workers are going to want to challenge it because we both want it. Maybe the risk is low, and you say, I'm going in with my eyes open. I know the risks. I'm going to set things up to minimize them as best possible. But I mean, nobody's going to give you like a guarantee. At least, as a lawyer, I'm not going to give you a guarantee that the person's going to be found to be a contractor. But I can tell you about the likelihood.
So it's less likelihood that I will be considered as an employer for these people.
I mean, yeah, depending on how you set it up, right? So we need to look carefully at the various things, and life is also like some of this. As much as there are tests that are articulated, and the entrepreneur test was articulated in a case called Montreal Locomotive, in the middle of the 20th century, but there's also just sort of a social reality. So if the person's not getting a lot of money and doesn't seem to have a whole lot of economic power and not much power vis-a-vis you, that's going to influence an employment standards officer or a judge to say the person's really an employee. If they're getting paid a whole lot of money and they're sophisticated and they're educated, that's going to influence the decision maker to say, I'm just going to, I'm not going to let this person, retroactively claim all the benefits of being an employee after they already got all the benefits of being a contractor. query whether there's a lot of legal logic behind that, but that's the way. But I mean, you also get random cases because people are human. You'll get like the one judge who says, well,